Hello and welcome to the Situation Report 5 of the Ukraine-Russia war. This time we are going to talk about some ingenious Ukrainian anti-propaganda measures and about even more Ukrainian offensives. But let's start. We start in the north where we start right away with the additional Ukrainian offensives. The Ukrainians have attacked Balaklia, which is here. They conquered Verbivka and have thrown the Russians across the river here, across the Seredyna-Balaklia river. The Russians have blown up the bridges to prevent the Ukrainians from following them. And as they already blew up the bridges here, close to Bayrak, it can be expected that the Ukrainians by now have conquered the southern shore of the Siversky Donetsk, south of Balaklia. The pro-Russian channel Starshe Edi has reported, I have it here, has reported that Balaklia is encircled and Volokhy Yar has fallen to the Ukrainians, for which we have picture proof. I have here the original. You can see the channel here, or you can find it here on Rob Lee, because I still have it from the German stream where it's in German. Actually, I could probably switch it here. And now you can pause and watch it. The image we have here, the video proof of the Ukrainians being in, let me turn off the music, of the Ukrainians being in Volokhiv Yar. And thanks to the tower, it can be localized, so they are on their way in the direction of Kupiansk. Just to show it to you on the picture, on the map, we have Volokhiv Yar here, and Kupiansk is up here. And Kupiansk is one of the essential concentrations. What is it called? Goddamn. Transportation hubs. I'm sorry. One of the transportation hubs that controls the ground communication lines towards Izium, and thus, should Kupiansk fall, it is highly likely that the Russians have to withdraw from this area of the front. By now, Semenivka has fallen, and they are advancing towards Shevchenkove. Also from the pro-Russian telegram, we see it here. Again, Rob Lee is saying it. We have it here, and the translation into English is here. Semyonovka under the Nazis, moving to Shevchenkove. So the Ukrainians have actually broken through completely through the Russian lines here. We see Semenivka here, and if we go down here, we have a breakthrough of close to 30 kilometers through the Russian lines by now. Also in the Kharkiv front, we have reports about Ukrainian strikes against the ground lines of communication of the Russians close to Kupiansk, likely with HIMARS. In Donbas, there have been no attacks from Izium towards Sloviansk in the last 48 hours, which is explained by the weaknesses of the Russian forces, as many of those troops have been moved towards the Kherson offensive and towards Zaporizhzhia. Smaller Russian attacks happened in the direction of Siversk, but all of this here seems to be a fixing action. They don't seem to have the forces anymore and put up the effort to actually break through the Ukrainian lines anymore. That's why we also hear again and again that in between the attacks, there are full days of rest where there are no attacks whatsoever happening. So that also seems to be more like a fixing action, maybe some recon advances, but not the proper attempts to actually break through the Ukrainian lines. On the other hand, this is still happening towards Bakhmut. We have heavy fighting at Soledar Bakhmutske, and I've said in the past, Soledar is of high importance to the Russians, as we can see the town here moving up. The town is so important because it is the gateway to those two ground lines of communication towards the north, which are ideally situated for the Ukrainian front line, as they run parallel to the front line, somewhat back, safely enough but at the same time close enough that the Ukrainians can use it to disperse resupplies and reinforcements and to react fast. Should the Russians reach Blahodatne here, they will be able to cut off those two ground lines of communications. That should not lead to an immediate collapse of the front line, as there are some smaller roads in the back to be able for the Ukrainians to keep using those. But the big mobility and especially the connection to Bakhmut will be cut, which will allow it to cut off and threaten Bakhmut further. Further Russian attacks happened at Vesela Dolina, Zaitseve and Semihiria. We see that here, and Kodena is now very likely conquered by the Russians by Wagner mercenaries. There are videos seemingly proving that. Additionally, we have more attacks west of Donetsk city in this direction. And there seem to be small advances from Pisky towards Pervomaiske, which is here. But the issue is the report says small advances to the outskirts of Pervomaiske. But when we look at the satellite map, we see that the town basically is moving along the road up to Pisky. So right now we can't even confirm how far the Russians have reached here. They seem to have reached the bridge, which should be this one. But apart from that, they might already have been stopped here, or they might have been advanced towards here. We don't really know, but there are at least reports of some small Russian advances in this direction. Around Avdiivka, which is one of the cornerstones of the Ukrainian defense along the old line of contact, there are no reports of further advances by the Russians. There are additional reports about advances, more attacks by the Russians in Marinka, which is still partially held by the Ukrainians, but I don't have any confirmed reports about Russian successes. What I do have reports, though, is even more Ukrainian attacks, this time again over the Seversky Donetsk, which we see here. In the last status report, I talked about Oserne, where they have crossed across the Seversky Donetsk and actually liberated a town on the other side of the river. Now we have proof of them being in Stary Karavan, which is also on the other side of the Seversky Donetsk, and we have that. Where is it? No, it's here. We have the proof here with pictures from Google Maps showing them in Stary Karavan, being along the road marching north, so in the direction of Lyman, which shows the Ukrainians have there actually crossed across the Seversky Donetsk and are threatening the Russian lines in the back here. In Zaporizhzhia, now we have actually news about the amphibious invasion. Now I need to take a hit here. I said, I never said I think it's a complete impossibility. I just said that it seems highly unlikely what the Russians claimed, that the Ukrainian special forces tried to conquer the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which didn't make any sense to me. I'd never had the idea, though, that it might be a possibility that a Ukrainian offensive, that Ukrainians actually did cross the river, but not towards the power plant, and the Russians would just frame it in this direction to use the outcry to use it for propaganda that the Ukrainians keep attacking the nuclear power plants, which they try to tell the rest of the world for weeks now. The Ukrainian GUR, that's the military intelligence of Ukraine, said GUR Spetsnaz, have the special forces of the military intelligence, did a commando raid on the other side of the reservoir towards this direction, and they caused heavy damage to Russian installations, as well as to the headquarters for the annexation referendum, which they destroyed, as well as the FSB, that's the Russian intelligence agency base that was right next to the building for the annexation referendum, which was also destroyed. For that, we have some satellite pictures here. This is from firms showing that there was heavy burning, that there was heavy fire. We see that here. It's here. And there seems to have been a building here from what I see, and now this building seems to be gone. We see the white shine is the same here, but this is gone. So there seems to have happened something. Obviously, this is from the GRU. So that's the Ukrainian military intelligence, which is an active participant of the war and thus has its genuine interest to frame information by its own way, or maybe even to invent something. But now it seems to be clear that there was actually a raid across the reservoir, but at least according to the Ukrainians, it was successful. Now, in the last situation report, I said I've seen a video of Ukrainian soldiers, of 5 Ukrainian soldiers dead on some sand. But I also mentioned that it was kind of weird that I didn't see any blood and couldn't identify any wounds on them. Now, I'm going to show you that video now, and you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be triggered, because I'm going to tell you something in advance. Those people are actually not corpses. Let me show this video to you. This is the original video that was spread throughout of the pro-Russian Telegram as a proof of the Ukrainian commando raid. We see one here. And as you can see, you don't see any wounds. Which seemed highly unlikely to me, but I didn't want to call it fake just because of that. The third one. Fourth, as you can see, it's like obviously they've been hit from while running from various angles. Here you could even see the black sun on the arm. That's a Nazi symbol. And here you see one with his pistol next to him, also dead. And this video is from the pro-Russian propaganda channel, shows us 2 Scar assault rifles that were given to them by the Belgians. Here, obviously, some skull head in reference probably to the concentration camp guards, meant to be. That was looking like a crusader. Here, another skull. Here we have the black sun and another Nazi symbol, or at least reference towards it, and obviously $100 bills, a lot of them, as you would expect from Ukrainian commando soldiers when you are a Russian propagandist and think that the Ukrainians obviously cross a border into your territory, and they will not only take swastikas or black suns and other NS symbols, but they will obviously take $100 bills as well for whatever reason. Now, the same video has appeared now, and it's a tiny bit longer. Now, I'm not going to waste. It's just 1 minute. Now, let's just go forward a little bit. You see, it's the same video, the exact same video. The black sun again. And now pay attention. Exact same video, only this time it doesn't end like as fast as the last one. Look here. Look here. Look here. And here. They weren't dead. Ukrainian troops made a joke of staging a fake video, and then apparently they managed to spread it among the pro-Russian circles to ridicule the pro-Russian Telegram circles, and at the same time this will help in some ways to counter Russian propaganda, as those who are watching this, those that are following the channel and that are not completely brainwashed and that are actually interested in the truth, will from now on question a little more what they see and will question a little more what they are being told. So, as I've said, since in my book, I had to laugh really hard when I heard about it first. It seems to be a complete, an exceptional thing that they actually managed to spread it inside of their circles. Obviously, there are no examples of that in the past that I can think of, because the social media wasn't really available inside of military conflicts in the past to allow for something like this. So a sensational event in this regard, where the Ukrainians not only countered the Russian propaganda by faking it, but at the same time trolled them really, really hard. When it comes to the nuclear power plant now, the majority of the IAEA delegation has left. 2 of their members have stayed back to surveil the nuclear power plant, and the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Organization, has said that the Russians did have military equipment inside of the nuclear power plant, which is a war crime according to the Geneva Convention, and that Rosatom personnel, so people from the Russian nuclear power organization, are interfering in decisions within the power plant, which in times of crisis, which in times of emergency might cause delays when it comes to reactions to that crisis. At the same time, workers from the nuclear power plant are not allowed in certain areas inside of their own power plant, which will also diminish their ability to act to an emergency. And one last information I have about the Oblast Zaporizhzhia. There are Russian actors, Ukrainian agents. I am not completely sure if it was like volunteers, civilians, or if it was actually military intelligence. But the Ukrainians created fake female profiles to flirt with Russians. Again, they did it already at the beginning of the war. They did it again, and Russian soldiers responded with pictures. And among those pictures, the Ukrainians could identify a specific area of Melitopol that was used by the Russians as barracks, and after that destroyed those barracks with HIMARS, probably causing high losses. When it comes to the Kherson area, this is where the offensive is still going on. The Ukrainians report to have destroyed more pontoon ferries in Lvove and Nova Kakhovka. That's here and here. And there are more attacks on command posts and ammo dumps. And the head of the occupation administration has told the Russian news agency TASS that the preparation for the annexation referendum are on ice now because of security questions, of security issues. The pontoon bridge that is visible on a video of that guy here is still not finished, but we see it's the only place actually where they try to build a pontoon bridge over the Dnieper. Also an indication of how wide it is, just so to show the width. And this is something where the Ukrainians have a huge advantage over their general use of HIMARS, as pontoon bridges can be easily destroyed even with the small warheads of the HIMARS. So they are forcing the Russians to switch over to pontoon ferries, which take far longer. As we can see here in the background, as you can imagine, if a bridge like this is ready, you can have heavy loads traversing the bridge every few meters. Depending on the stability, every 10, every 15 meters can be a heavily loaded truck, a tank or something like else, crossing slowly, driving over the bridge. And you do that for an hour or two, depending on your doctrine and depending on your needs. And then you would reverse traffic if it's not actually this thick that it can go two ways, but then you would reverse traffic and the empty trucks can go back. And thus you have a steady flow and steady use and a fast transportation going across the bridge. Now, as the Ukrainians are threatening to destroy all of those bridges, as every one of those potential bridgeheads, every one of those potential bridging points, that's probably a better word, is within range of the HIMARS, they are forced to use pontoon ferries, which are propelled by small boats, which probably limits them to something like 10 miles, which means while on that pontoon ferry, a couple of trucks can be situated. Traversing the Dnieper takes a lot of time, and thus the efficiency of their transport is lowered. And at the same time, it causes another kind of problems. If you have a transportation, for instance, we have seen one down here, which was starting here and roughly going to here. You have areas where the trucks and the troops are assembling to board the ferry, and as the shore isn't able to carry and to be accessible to ferries, it is a limited area where the ferries can even land. And now those can obviously also be attacked. And then it's a question of doctrine and discipline. If you spread out your trucks, for instance, for that, then obviously you can prevent them being hit with a HIMARS strike. But if you spread them out over a bigger area, loading them will take much more time. Whereas if you keep them together, you can quickly do it and increase the ferry. So in the end, it's weighing of the odds, weighing of pros and cons from both sides. What is done in the end, whether they take the risk of having destroyed their assembly area or not. But what will be done is that Ukrainians are aware of their knowledge of the area and of the satellite pictures, where exactly the ferries land, and then they can just strike those areas. Obviously, some of those hits will miss unless the Ukrainians by now have received some better missiles with seeker heads that are able to identify targets by themselves, but that would be new to me. So I expect them still to be mainly GPS guided and inertial with inertial navigation. And unless they have someone on the ground, unless they have live feeds knowing that now the ferry is landing, so when they open fire now, the ferry will still be there when the rockets hit. Unless this is the actual case, the Ukrainians, it's more hit or miss. But in the end, it's still a limited opportunity where the Russians can be, and at the same time the number of troops that can be ferried across with the pontoon ferries is limited. If we come now to the changes in territory, we can say in northern Kherson, Novovoskresenske is now confirmed to be in Ukrainian hands. They're still fighting, as it seems by now, for Arkhangelsk, and the Russians have claimed to have pushed north and are to threaten Olhune again. Now, this is unconfirmed by now, but what we know is that the Ukrainians definitely gained some ground in the north. When it comes to the Inhulets bridgehead, which we see here, the Ukrainians are talking about attacks, about air attacks against Bezimene. Bezimene is here. And the Russians themselves say there's fighting for Snihurivka. Snihurivka is here, and the Bezimene would tell us that the Ukrainians are already here. But obviously, as we can see along the front line, there might be the possibility that the Ukrainians went at least partially around the town and thus are somewhere in this area where the Ukrainians might identify the air attacks against them to be close to Bezimene. But what we do know that there is Ukrainian offensive activity in this region. On the other hand, when it comes to Kostromka, the news right now is that the Russians claim they have reconquered it, but that is as of now, that's unconfirmed. But there have been Russian counterattacks in this area. It seems like at least Kostromka by now is being fought for. But since the beginning of the offensive, they have widened the bridgehead. They have widened it to the southwest as well, and they've gained some ground here as well. In the south of Kherson, the Russians are saying they defeated a Ukrainian attack against Zeleny High, which is here. And the Ukrainians say they defeated Russian attacks in Lyubomirivka, Shmitove, and Ternovi Podi. Those three towns. Now that is kind of surprising with Lyobomirivka, as it's behind those two, and the water here would not make us guess that the Russians have probably attacked towards this direction. So this is somewhat uncertain how all three of those towns can be under attack. At least it seems unlikely that the Russians went between the towns to push to the third one. But still, the information we have now is, on the other hand, they might have gone. There might be fighting in this area along that road here, and then it would be close to those three towns. Right now, there is activity there, but what we see is Russian counterattacks. In general, we can see since the beginning of the offensive, the Ukrainians have gained some ground, but they haven't gained too much. Their progress is very slow, but according to them, it is very systematic. Russian military bloggers are claiming wherever they are retreating, that was planned to lure Ukrainian troops into their areas of destruction for their artillery to destroy them. And in fact, there is one video of through thermal vision where you can see a number of soldiers walking and then massive explosions supposedly taking them out. As of now, we can't really confirm where it's from. At least I wasn't able to. And obviously, at the same time, it could even be a fake, as thermal vision isn't that clear. There have been cases in the last days where Russians claimed the video showing an destruction of a small task force, of a small group, was them destroying Ukrainians, while the pro-Ukrainian internet claimed it was them destroying Russians. So in that case, we don't have full confirmation what's going on, but the Russians obviously say whenever they pull back, that was planned to just kill more Ukrainians. Also, the Russians say they are doing precision strikes against Ukrainian ammo dumps and command posts and defeating Ukrainian attacks. It kind of seems a little funny that with their reports now, they basically try to report the same as the Ukrainians do. Hey, by the way, we also destroy ammo dams and command points. When we come to the whole offensive now, it is still uncertain to what degree it's happening. There are pro-Ukrainian voices that actually claim this isn't even a major offensive. Seeing the breakthrough in the north, it might be an indication that this might actually be a seriously carried out feint at this point, as we don't have the full numbers. As we see, the Ukrainians seem to be strong enough to advance, but not strong enough to throw the Russians aside. And the Russians are actually strong enough to counterattack, at least with some degree of success, which would actually indicate that the balance of power there is not that far apart as you would expect for an offensive. Whereas here in the north, there seems to have been a significant breakthrough, and that would actually fit in the narrative that the Ukrainians said for months they are going to do an offensive in the south, and thus warning the Russians about what's to come, which didn't make any military sense. So we might actually find out in the next coming 2 or 3 weeks maybe that this was a planned operation by the Ukrainians to lure in as many Russians as possible to allow for an offensive elsewhere. Because if they manage a breakthrough here with small losses and capture Kupiansk, that would push back the Russians probably along this line, liberate a lot of territory, secure the Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, all for small losses, whereas Kherson was an obvious target, as capturing the eastern, the right bank, the northern bank in this place of the Dnieper is a major strategic advantage for the Ukrainians, as it would prevent the Russians from later advancing towards Mykolaiv and Odessa. And at the same time, crossing a river of this size under fire would be extremely bloody and close to impossible once the Ukrainians are aware of that, not like at the beginning of the war where they were unprepared. That once the Ukrainians capture this, that it seems likely under any reasonable circumstances for the Russian to cross that river again in an amphibious operation across the Dnieper seems extremely unlikely. So that is a prime target for a Ukrainian offensive, as it secures the Odessa flank and as it allows them to shorten their front line and redeploy troops. And as it was so obvious, it was maybe too obvious, and with their confirmations, they might have actually been able to achieve luring in more Russians. As we all even heard that the Russian troops in the Kherson bridgehead were doubled within the last 2 months, roughly. So what we might see here is a big feint, which we haven't seen so far in this war, that this here might be the actual main invasion, but it is too early. I need to emphasize that it is too early to confirm that it at this point. We will have to see what is happening over the next few days, as we have basically no serious informations about troop strength either here or here. This offensive might continue. It was not much of a surprise that the Ukrainians gained some ground in the beginning. I said the same on the German channel when it came towards the offensive here. When we look at past offensives, in almost every case, there's a breakthrough of the front lines in the moment of attack. That's easily explained by the fact that the attacker decides where he's going to attack and when he's going to attack. And that his ability to concentrate forces and to surprise the enemy should allow him to break through the first lines of the opposing defense. It's only the question, how far can he widen breakthrough. Even when we see German offensive in 1945, basically at the end of the war, when they attacked, they usually gained some ground initially, but they were stopped within 5 to 7 kilometers and then pushed back because they didn't have the strength to use that gap in the enemy's defense and to widen it and to punch through further lines. And so that an initial attack achieves some result, as is to be expected, has to be expected, and anyone believing anything else would be completely mistaken to expect that the Ukrainians in their attacks would be stopped dead at the front line. So a breakthrough was to be expected, a breakthrough the first line. But how far they can continue it and how far they can continue attacking once their offensive has started, that is the big question. And as of now, there is no confirmation yet. We don't know when the accumulation point of the Ukrainian offensive will be reached. And as of now, we can't even say whether this is their main offensive or just some shaping of the battlefield in preparation of other offensives. As of now, we see the Russians telling the truth that this is a systematic and slow progress that they intend, which would also make sense as they lack the strong mechanized forces and the air superiority, or at least the high mobility air defense, powerful air defense, to accompany their pushes through their potential pushes through a Russian line. And what we see here now is the Ukrainians trying to slowly move forward, doing artillery support, recon units, and it might turn out that this was mainly aimed at fixing the Russians in place, because at the same time, the point of that beginning of the defensive, just roughly 1 month ahead of the Rasputitsa, seems not that successful, not that promising, because to expect that the Ukrainians would reach Kherson within 1 month seems to be highly optimistic. And once the Rasputitsa is hit, the Ukrainians will mostly be forced to stick to paved roads until the winter sets in. So this offensive probably will not achieve strategic breakthrough as a massive change along the front line. They will not be able to liberate the right shore of the Dnieper in this operation. They are advancing, but it might be indication that the actual offensive might be towards Kupiansk, which would likely force the Russians to withdraw from Izium. We have some more news. According to Russian military, no, that was already it. We have S-300V that were filmed. That is an interesting point. Those are against ballistic missiles, and it is maybe in combination with the other that was in Kherson. It is maybe in combination with the other news we have, and that is that the commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the commander-in-chief, and the head of the Security Council now confirmed that it was Ukrainian missiles that were hitting the Saki airport. Now, those S-300V are against ballistic missiles, so that they are here might be an indication that they should use against ballistic missiles, even though mid-flight seems less likely use of anti-ballistic missile systems. They should probably be closer to the intended targets. The other option is that those are, as they are against ballistic missiles and Ukraine isn't really rich in ballistic missiles, that's an example of the S-300 that are not deemed needed in this war by the Russians and thus are being used up for ground-to-ground pounding, of which we have reports for several months now, mostly of Mykolaiv being shelled with S-300 SAM systems. Partisans, we have one more news about partisans, and that is that the Artem Bardin, the commander of the occupation council in Berdyansk, which is here, has been attacked with an IED. He is apparently still alive, but is supposedly heavily wounded and in medical care as of now. More news are that on the 5th of September, Putin has praised the troops of the DNR and LNR, the so-called People's Republic of Donetsk and Luhansk, his puppet regimes here, and he claimed that they are fighting better than the regular Russian forces, which might be aimed at increasing their recruiting drive, as we have as the Ukrainian Resistance Center is saying Russia aims to recruit 10,000 citizens living in Luhansk. And for that, they are using data from the school system to force parents of school children, fathers of school children into the military service. So it might be an encouragement that they are at least highly respected if they're already being used up in the fights. But it should definitely cause some discontent among the Russian regular armed forces when this rebel from DNR and LNR, of which we've seen pictures of their bad equipment and their low discipline, if those are being praised by Putin. We have another interesting news. This is, by the way, Rybar, the one of the big pro-Russia channels, which is already also showing the massive advances of the Ukrainians up here. And the last thing is we have a document here from the Russian Finance Ministry, supposedly. It's from the 28th of August, and it's saying that families of dead soldiers were given 361.4 billion rubles, 7.4 million for each, which would mean that there are 48,838 fallen Russian soldiers in this war. Now, this number is suspiciously close to the Ukrainian claims. So it seems actually, while that's interesting and while that could mean something, it's much more likely, according to my judgment at least, that this is a Ukrainian propaganda ploy and should not be judged as authentic. At least until I find out better, for me, this is a Ukrainian propaganda ploy. The latest news we have is that Russia is now buying missiles and rockets and grenades from the North Koreans, which would indicate something coming in close to a collapse of the Russian military complex. As we were talking about one of the most simple military products when it comes to actual gear, to war-fighting gear, that is grenades. Not smart bombs, not GPS-guided smart chips-loading weapons, but simple, dumb artillery rounds that they are now supposedly buying millions of the North Korean would indicate that the Russian defense industry cannot keep up with demand, and that actually their depots are starting to run dry, or at least that the Russians expect them to run dry in a time frame that is close enough that they have to start looking for other suppliers. In that combination, we can talk about the supposed buy of up to 700 Iranian drones that are being talked about. Now, many of those drones will likely be small ones. We shouldn't compare them to Predator drones or something like that from the US, but many of those will likely be small kamikaze drones, loitering munitions, etc. But that Russia, one of the supposedly most sophisticated military complexes that is highly dependent on its export, is now buying from basically third world countries, should make an impression on potential buyers and on its export markets, which we can expect to find in the order books within the next months or years, especially as this comes in combination with the orders from with the results of the use of the Russian material inside of this war, where it hasn't proven to be as superior as the Russian propaganda turns it into. Now, this is what I have for the status report. As I can see, the number of viewers is still fairly small, but before we end this today's status report, I want to give you the opportunity for some questions and answers, which is one of the highlights of my German channel, even though we had a new viewer record there today in the 4 digits. So a little more humble here, but maybe I find some of you interested enough in some questions. For that, I'm going to give it a few seconds while I take a sip, as my throat is running a little dry after 3.5 hours of stream for the German channel. Okay, there does not seem to be a question here. In this case, I am finishing it up. I hope you enjoyed it. As said, this channel is highly popular in Germany and well liked by its viewers for the work I do. I'm a military historian, and I'm interested and working on this topic for 30 years. So I've have some experience. I'm a former German soldier. As well as this, I can add some small level military experience on top of this. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell button so you don't miss future videos. And it would obviously be highly appreciated if you recommend this channel to friends and acquaintances, so it can actually grow and I don't have to talk mostly to myself in future live streams. I hope you enjoyed it. That should be it for today from my side. There will likely be another small live stream on Saturday, probably also around 1900 UCT -5, which should be 2000 in on the East Coast in the US. Jamif, thank you for commenting. Are you one of my followers from the German channel who's coming here to try to support it, or have you actually found me here for the first time? Oh, that's nice to see that I'm actually finally gaining some English speaking viewers. As said, right now it doesn't seem to work that I pre-plan streams. So I am not able right now to say that I'm going to do a stream at 2000 and you can subscribe to that. I guess I have to reach 1000 subs for that to unlock this option. But there will likely be another stream on Saturday at 1900 UCT -5. You can compare it to your own time wherever you are. So thank you for joining. Thank you for commenting. Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's one of the things my German viewers like. As I said, I'm a historian, and from my point, my scientific approach, I'm not going to lie to myself by believing the propaganda for a side that I have the sympathies. So I try to be as objective as possible, use the knowledge that I learned by studying history and getting my master's degree. That is basically mostly source critic to find out what's actually the truth. And I try to apply it as much here as possible, in combination that for years, really for decades, I'm reading into military history, armed forces, strategy and tactics, and international conflicts. So the German channel is highly appreciated, and I hope I can find the audience here as well if my accent and my occasional blackout when it comes to words doesn't turn off too much, but I think more or less it should be fine. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for writing and giving me some feedback. That's obviously highly appreciated. Not talking in front of an empty chat the whole time. So thank you for finding you here, and maybe I'll see you on a Saturday. Thank you for coming and have a good night.